So it has just gone the top of the hour, according to my clock, which is the one that's right by definition. So welcome to the DMARC working group session at IETF117 in San Francisco, or wherever it is remotely. I'm Barry Leba, one of your chairs. Seth is not around, right? Yes, Seth is not here now. He's got some family things to deal with. And let's get started. I have to get, I'm trying, this is the first time I've chaired a meeting from my iPad rather than my laptop. So let's see how well that works. Okay. Note the note well, as I like to say. This tells you what your responsibilities are for when you participate in IETF activities. Please be well aware of them and remember that it includes code of conduct. Some people call it be nice. I'll say be civil, be professional, and have good discussions on the technical topics, as well as the other things that this tells you. How to deal with the meeting. You got to be on Meet Echo. If you're not in the room, then you are on Meet Echo, or else you're not hearing me. If you're in the room, please get on Meet Echo, either through scanning the code in the front of the room or coming from the agenda link. When you that will get you on the blue sheets, the attendance list. Also, that will let you get in the microphone queue if you have something to say. If you need to use the microphone, please join the queue from Meet Echo so that you are properly interleaved with the remote participants. It's so Todd is embarrassed to say that he can't find it. It's the on, yeah. It does not. You're correct. It does not say Meet Echo, but it is in fact Meet Echo. So go there. All right. Here's the agenda for today. We have two main topics. One of them is the ongoing discussion of what to say in the document about your responsibilities as a sender when you're using P=reject, and what you ought to be doing as a recipient when you get something that's got a policy of P=reject. And we have a number of options to discuss there. The other is a discussion of a proposal that came up recently about what to do with SPF and whether SPF still, I'm getting an echo from Todd, whether SPF is still applicable in DMARC or whether we should get rid of it, and what options we have there. I'll just stress that the proposal that was made is only about what to do about SPF in its use in DMARC. No one is suggesting that we deprecate SPF in general right now. And then we'll just see if there's anything else, if there's time left. We actually asked for a 1 hour slot and we got an 1.5 hour slot. We will use whatever we need. I suspect we'll need more than the 1.5 hours, so we'll stop there. But before we go on to further things, Murray has a few things to say. So let me switch over to Murray's slides. And that would be that one. So Murray is going to think food here.
There we go. Thank you. Good afternoon. I wanted to check in with you as the area director looking after this working group about, there's another echo.
Yeah, turn your volume down.
Okay. Where we've come and in what period of time, where we are, expectations and so forth. So this is a summary I produced from the data tracker about the history of this working group, some of the history of the documents that it's produced. You know, we started the first DMARC draft of any form appeared in the IETF repositories in March 2013. About that time, we started talking about creating a working group so that we could produce a standards track version of this, because the idea was to put it through the independent submission stream, which can only produce informationals. Once there was something people could refer to, Yahoo took it upon themselves to publish P=reject before we were actually done with it. And you all know what the damage was when that happened. The actual chartering happened in August 2014. And since then we've published, well, 7049 got published about a year later. And then we've had 5 documents published since then. You can see the timeline of those 5 things here. Next, please. want to highlight these two. We started talking about creating this working group July 2013. It is now July 2023. The working group actually chartered just over a year later after quite a bit of talking about what the expectations of the working group would be and what it would produce. Next, please. So it's been 9 years that we've been at this. Next, please. So the first thing I want to talk about is how long we've been doing this. There aren't many working groups that are around 9 years working on its primary problem. Usually by now we've had, comparing to other working groups, we've had the primary document out, maybe some auxiliary documents out, possibly an update, some errata have happened, but this working group is still working on its main deliverable. You're on your 4th area director now. This was chartered under Pete, it passed through Barry, it passed through Alexi, and now it's sitting with me. The art area has grown to, through no fault of DMARC, but still it has grown. It now is 36 working groups with 3 more in the process of chartering, so that's 39 total. We are under increasing...
And whose fault is that?
So some of it is the IETF doesn't want to, let's see, we don't want to say no to other work just because we're busy. If there's stuff that we need to be doing, if our scope is too small, if we've been too tough, we should consider other work. But at the same time, there are a lot of working groups not producing much or they're not meeting their milestones. And I think that this is starting to become a very obvious example. The next AD may not be as tolerant of this as the 4 of us have been. You might get someone in who just wants to shed work. And if this is not going to work, then this working group will be on the chopping block. I can't promise that any longevity beyond the end of my term, which is March. So we start asking questions like, should this working group's energy be better used in other ways? Email core could use some more energy from email people. Maybe extra, maybe JMAP. There's 5 or 6 working groups in the email space. If this working group, we should really consider if there's a there here, right? After 9 years and we haven't solved the main problems, like what are we doing? It's not impossible that there's a solution out there, but we should start asking ourselves some of these questions. Do we have the energy to keep searching for a solution if there is one? We have, I would say, venture to say there is a frequent problem with distractions and regressions into stuff we've already debated and so forth. So please be careful about this. Next, please. So back to the timeline, let's focus on these last 2 things. There are 2 experimental documents this working group has produced. Next, please. So we're doing 2 experiments, MARC, PSD, what's this getting for us? Next. So I guess these experiments are running. I've asked a few times, like, what's the status? What are we getting out of these experiments? Is this advancing the DMARC cause? I don't feel like we've gotten a report that we could consider official, formal, complete, or anything like that from the places that are implementing this. There's an open source implementation I know about. Gmail, I believe, has ARC stuff. Does it help the DMARC story? Is it something we should be folding in? It seems like we don't have solid answers for this yet. So ARC is 4 years old and we still don't know, or at least I don't have the impression that we know for sure whether this is something we want to embrace. So do we need more time to figure out ARC? Can someone explain, like, what would we get out of waiting longer? Or is it time to just fold it in? Or is it time to decide there's nothing here? PSD has been out for 2 years now. What are the results of that? I've seen posts from I believe Scott from time to time saying, we've added another participant in PSD, we've added another one, we've added another one. What's the outcome of this? Do we need more time? Next, please. And one more point for you all to think about. So I went back and I looked at the conversation that was happening during the chartering of DMARC, which came just after when Yahoo flipped the switch and the disruption really started to happen. 2 emails jumped out at me. The working group should consider the idea that there is just not a future for this. Like, it's too disruptive, it causes too many problems, it's not worth it. Next thing. The other possibility is, whatever we produce, we better be able to justify. The community is going to ask during IETF last call, the ISG is going to ask during its evaluation period, is this the right thing for the internet? Next. And it seems like, we've been tasked with fixing the mailing list problem in some way. There's got to be some progress to moving it along, but we're shying away. We're taking the more expensive option, and I don't understand. Maybe it's the right thing to do, but there should be some more conversation about this. Next, please. So those of you who were around then when this rolled out, the IETF was really angry that this happened because the IETF's business is entirely conducted on mailing lists. And DMARC just made a complete mess of everything. I invite you to go back and find a thread that started on April 29th, 2014, just after this happened, where we started discussing what's the damage, what should we do about it, who should be held accountable. It still comes up for those of you who attend. regularly at plenary, like, when is this going to get fixed? And we just, usually the answer is there's a working group working on it. Well, back to my first point, we've been saying that for a long time. There are mitigations, fix the from field, which we've been debating. The world doesn't like that as an answer. So if we're going to push it, we better be sure that it's the right answer and we're prepared to defend it. Now, nobody doubts the claims that DMARC solves a problem, but is the cost that DMARC creates worth that, solving just that problem, especially when it doesn't solve cousin domains, it doesn't solve display name attacks. These things still remain. So in the body of the disruption it causes versus the benefit, is the balance right? Are we prepared to stand behind that? Here's the last thing I'm going to say, and this is the most important point. When this working group was chartered, the contract we have with the IESG is we will produce something that makes this situation better. If we advance something that waters down the idea that this should be deployed correctly and with minimal disruption, there's going to be fierce response to it. It's going to have a really hard time getting through. And that's, Barry, when you were on the ISG, you even said, I want to make sure that something comes out that will solve this problem, or is a positive step at least. I have at least the same position, and the other area directors are going to be even less sympathetic, I predict. So I want this working group to give some really serious thought when we're talking about, should we put a must there? What sort of advice do we want to give? What are the technical solutions? Because I don't think we're going to get off easy. Happy to take questions, or you can just move on. I'm not changing the deal that we made with the ISG. I'm just reminding you of the deal you have with the ISG. Is there a queue?
Any discussion, or do we just take what Murray said as fiat? So,
I said this is a conversation.
Jim and then Wes.
Yeah.
I guess I was a little bit faster on the clicker. Kind of wish you'd gone first. Anyhow, strongly agree with the sentiment that you expressed there. I kind of feel like this working group, I can't follow all of the messages in the working group. So what I do is I from time to time I just kind of dip back in, say what's going on there, okay, and then I go away for a while, because 9 years is a long time, and I don't know how many messages have been on the DMARC list in that period of time, but it's thousands.
More than a few, yes.
Yeah. So, I personally don't believe that there is a comprehensive solution to this. ARC comes about as close to it as we can. The question is, or at least one question for ARC, is whether the experiment is successful, of course, but also the deployment of it. I see ARC on a lot of messages that I get from especially some of the large providers, but there's no indication about who is actually using ARC in order to solve the problem that it's solving. I mean, sort of the information is there in the messages, but it's like so many other protocols of this sort, it's very hard to tell when somebody is actually using it, using it to benefit. So, yeah, thank you for.
Yeah, sure. I mean, the ISG will, whoever is doing last calls, or whoever is looking into this, will have to look at the evidence that there is deployment, if any, and decide, is that good enough for us to move forward? You're absolutely right. I think that a big step would be to resolve, yes, we want ARC to be part of it. Like, great, fold that into DMARC this, and we can call that closed and move on. But I mean, as the AD looking down on this, I see, I don't see anyone owning that. I see like, well, we did that piece, and it's kind of like we checked that box, but that box it's not done.
It's not checked until you have the results of the experiment.
Right.
Wes.
Wes Hardiker, ISI, and speaking for myself, certainly not the ICANN board.
I didn't even know you were on the ICANN board.
I'm on the ICANN board. I'm not speaking for the ICANN board. I'm told that I should say I'm on the ICANN board, but I'm not speaking for the ICANN board. Every time I speak, it's really annoying. Good rant.
Thank you.
Loved it. You missed a few things. I miss the days. I used to actually, at IETFs, right? I'd run a mail server on my laptop, watch the queue, make sure stuff went out, right? That is no longer possible. And, it's the advent of all of the problems are, of course, are not actually DMARCs, right? It's the fact that spam exists and things like that. And that has driven centralization to the point where we have gigantic mail servers, and it's really, really hard to run your own. I recently had to renumber a mail server with all the pain that goes along with that. And to be perfectly honest, DMARC actually helped me a little bit then, because they do trust your servers more, if you're doing DMARC. And I got less rate limited once I, re-enabled DMARC on that particular domain from that particular new address. So to some extent, the cat is sort of out of the bag. Right. And I hesitate to do things like say this technology should go away, or this working group is not, doing a job, when the problem is still very much unsolved and we need a direction to go. And congratulations, Barry. We're now going to eat that extra half an hour you have on this subject too.
Yeah, I was just trying to figure out how to close the queue for this.
So
oh my goodness.
In the end, I'm mixed, right? But I'm actually most mad at the state of the internet. And if there's anything that's going to fix it, it might be this working group, even if we can address the mail server problem. I mean, the DMARC reports are useless, right? Because it's like if you send any message to any mailing list, you now just got flooded with a bunch of things that are completely impossible to read, with a lot of fails and a lot of success, and you actually have no idea what somebody actually did. So
I think that
there's my rant.
I think you remind me of something I probably should have included. You're right. I forgot something. Perfect may be the enemy of the good. Maybe one of the things that we're doing here is looking for the ultimate solution, which we'll never find. But if we can hit a 90% solution, and I do not have one in mind, I'm not trying to nudge the working group in a particular direction. But if there's a way to hit the 90% thing, let's give that some serious consideration.
Yeah, I would be happy with a 51% solution.
Yeah.
No,
Before you go, John, let me just, I can't find the thing on this client to close the queue. The queue is closed after Neil.
Okay.
Go ahead.
We are in an impossible position. It somewhat reminds me of the situation with NAT 20 years ago, which is like NAT is a crappy technology, but everybody uses it, and pretending that we can make it go away will just make us look silly. And DMARC as designed was pretty reasonable. DMARC as implemented sucks.
Yep.
Yeah. And I think, and we also have a problem that like there's a DMARC industry whose interests are basically aligned with bulk senders and contrary to that of individual mail users and people who use mailing lists. And, and while they are not actively hostile to us, like they have business reasons to ignore us if we say things that interfere with their business model.
Sure.
Yeah. So, I do not think we can fix the mailing list problem. I mean, I think we can propose ARC. I talked to my pals from Gmail about perhaps we should revisit message wrapping, which is a technology we've had since mine was invented 30 years ago, which in principle could do it, but we require MUAs to deal with wrapped messages better than they do, which would have other advantages, So while I understand the contract we have, I mean, I think we've had 10 years of force majeure, and so we desperately need to finish up. I do not think we have a whole lot of work to do. I think so long as the group and particularly the chairs can shut down the distractions, because we've had the same crap going over and over again. I think like this list is actually a pretty reasonable list of what we're going to do, give or take adding ARC, maybe adding PSD, which works fine but is harmless, so who cares? And I think we should finish up, and I think we should report back. And you said like, does this fix mailing list problem? The answer is going to be no. But if we don't at least take this step, the mailing list problem is only going to get worse, and we're not going to have anything to say about it.
I mean, I don't think that. I think the ISG. I predict. I can't speak for the ISG, but I predict that it would be tolerable if we came back and said we can't fix that. There's no way. It's just this is incompatible with the history that was there, and this is the world we're in now. But explain that in a way that's not basically just throwing up your hands and saying, like, explain to them why this is a digestible answer. And in addition to that, if we can do something about the list mitigation, whatever it is we come with, and like fix the ugly parts or explain why it has to be ugly. I just the impression that I get watching the dialogue lately has just sort of been. We're not going to get any answer when it gets up to us, and it'll be like we've punted on all the problems, and that's just not going to fly.
I would certainly be happy to write an informational document, sort of parallel to that, just sort of lays out here's why mailing lists are broken. Here's the approaches people have taken. Here's why they work better or worse, and are more or less like our mitigation works better than simply rewriting the from in the usual way, but it requires access to the MTA that most people don't have. Blah 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 blah.
Right. Yes, I think anything that's anything that I thought would be great. I'll stop there.
Mike.
My camera.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Okay. Murray, I think your slides are great. I'd love to get a copy.
You just want the memes, I know it.
But I have to kind of point out this working group in the whole process was never tasked with solving cousin domains and other sorts of abuse and attacks. So I think it's unfair to kind of throw that onto the DMARC working group as not having solved all those things. So just pointing that out.
Okay.
The second thing is one of the original participants in DMARC.org. It was originally published publicly, not through IETF, in 2011. It was very focused on direct domain abuse. And it was never put out there for use by general purpose emailing, whatever. So again, I think it's a little bit unfair. And I think the fact that whether it was Yahoo or AOL or other domains leveraging the DMARC capability to solve their problems indicates that there were wider problems, and it just happened to be a tool that they chose to use. One of the elephants in the room that has come up multiple times is who gets to decide how a domain is used for email purposes. Is it the domain owner / administrator? Is it individual users? How do domains control those users? So there's a lot of things beyond DMARC itself that impact the discussions, the positions that people take, etc. And I recognize the mailing list problem, and I have sympathy for folks in that space. And I agree with you that it's primarily larger / business mailers who are interested, or I'm not sure how to phrase it, in driving DMARC, but I think there's other folks beyond that. So in summary, I don't think just kind of throwing out DMARC or throwing our hands up is the right answer to the questions that you raise. And as a parting shot, and I hate to point fingers, one of the reasons it's dragged on so long is that the chairs have not, I saw that finger pointing, is that the chairs have not corralled people, shut down the bringing up of the same issues that have been closed or stated as out of bounds. I think we could have gotten through this all much earlier. And I've been frustrated, and I've expressed that frustration at various points. So going forward, let's wrap this up. Let's recognize where the issues are, and just stay on track.
Yeah, I got a couple of things I want to say about that. First, I'll say yes. I could have been more aggressive about shutting down repeat discussions. I opted to allow more discussion. Maybe that was the wrong choice. So I own that. But the other thing is that I don't, Murray was not trying to say that DMARC ought to be solving all of these other problems like the cousin domains and that sort of stuff. What he was saying was, given that what DMARC does is as limited as it is. The answer to the balance between that and the damage it causes may be different than if it absolutely shut down the ability to fool people into thinking somebody was you, then we might have a different answer to what that balance is. We might be willing to accept more damage.
Yep.
Given that it doesn't do that, we need to have that conversation. I think that was really his point.
That was everything I was going to say.
Yeah. Wei.
Wei Chuang, Google. I just wanted to point out two things, and probably these are things that are probably obvious to a lot of folks, but maybe not. First thing, spam is a moving target, and basically, part of the issues with this working group is that, it's being impinged upon. Spammers getting more sophisticated with their techniques. What was effective maybe 10 years ago is not effective anymore, and then that's part of the issue of the sort of evolving landscape and part of the damage that's being caused. I mean, the spammers, as they advance in their techniques, there's more deliverability damage, basically. And people blame it, and I think it's mistaken blame, perhaps, maybe not, on DMARC. And that just has to be factored in. The other part, and this is, to John's point about infrastructure. So, of course, DMARC is based on authentication techniques, SPF and DKIM, and these have not stood the test of times. There have been vulnerabilities pointed out recently for, DKIM replay as well as SPF upgrade attacks. These, of course, these methods, SPF and DKIM, have problems with the mailing lists, and of course, it's DMARC that gets the blame. So I don't really think, until some of these infrastructure issues are going to be solved, it's going to, DMARC will just keep on taking the blame, and it'll feel as if the problem doesn't really get solved, where I think there needs to be more effort to be placed in email authentication. Yes, there is, the DKIM working group has been respun up. There's an opportunity there, and then, we should take advantage of that and try to fix a lot of the things that are mistakenly placed on DMARC, perhaps in DKIM.
On DKIM, I would say, yes, we've spun up the working group and it has gone completely dead. So if people believe there are solutions in there, it would be great to see some participation. On the first point, you're right that DMARC takes a lot of the blame, but DMARC was the first one that caused bounces at this scale and within the infrastructure. Like SPF-all started to go away when people saw the damage that it caused. Right, it's okay. But like P equals reject, when people saw the damage, they didn't back off of it. They doubled down. So I think the blame is landing where it should. But I don't know that the fix is necessary. Like maybe this is just a communication thing. Maybe the industry needs to just hear a lot of what you just said and an explanation, but I don't think the blame is landing in the wrong place. That's my opinion, at least.
Hector. And I'll say we've known Hector Santos. Yeah. We've known Hector for about 20 years, but this is the first time he's been to an IETF meeting.
Guys.
Next one's in Miami.
To your points, Murray,
Yeah.
I think a lot can be simplified. We just change the status from standard track to informational or best current practice. I don't think it's even the best current practice. Okay. And
you mean for DMARC BIS? You want to make it informational?
Yeah,
okay.
The draft. And then agreeing with Wes here, was Wes? Yeah. Okay. About small mail providers, it's much harder to implement. And the overhead of ARC is just out of reach. I mean, to add that to solve this problem, I don't think that's the approach.
Okay. And actually, along that line, I'll say on the screen here, item 2 on the agenda and the options currently open. One option that I did not put in that list that is a possibility is that we abandon the idea of putting this out as standards track and just make it another informational version.
Yep.
That is still a possibility. Yeah. Okay. Neil.
Neil Jenkins, Fastmail. I agree with, I think, everything Murray said at the beginning. Few points I just wanted to note. I actually disagree about making informational versus standards track. I think on the general internet, people do not notice the difference at all. If there is a document that has RFC number on it, they're going to go, that is the thing. And we already see out there a lot of people saying, you must have DMARC. It is, if you don't, you're insecure. And there's sites that will give you nice red crosses and green ticks. And if there's an RFC behind that as well, oh boy, it's going to get even worse.
Can I, on your first point,
Yes.
not only is that true, but people like Yahoo posted P equals reject when it was only a draft. It wasn't even informational
Sure.
yet.
But, and I think other thoughts. Firstly, at Fastmail, we don't honor P equals reject, and I doubt we're going to anytime soon because it is the customers that get to decide whether they want that mail or not, and there's way too many false positives if we do that. We do use the information for various things for filtering. I think the concept of DMARC is reasonable in terms of here's a good way of like being pretty sure it's not being tampered with from the original, but what you do with it, that's where I think there's the bigger problems. That's where the P equals reject comes in. One of the things we do is we look at the stream of mail for each user and for each address. Is this all authenticated mail from this address? If so, something unauthenticated, well, that's really suspicious. We're going to do something bad with that. But if they get a mix of authenticated and unauthenticated mail, unauthenticated mail from this address, because they also get lots of stuff via mailing lists and stuff, well, fine. You know, we'll let it through. So I think final comment, I do agree that the cat's out of the bag, and I don't think you can just like say, it's a bad idea, it should all go away, everyone stop using this now. I think that's unlikely to happen, unfortunately. I think, therefore, the best solution is some strong text around when you should use P equals reject and what your options are for handling that on the receiving side as well.
And that's a good segue into the next discussion.
Yes, thank
you. Murray, any?
Todd wants to get on the mic.
Who honored the P equal reject when Yahoo published it?
Go to
Todd?
Mike, please.
Todd Herr, co-editor, DMARC Biz. I do remember when Yahoo published P equal reject in 2014, but who honored it to cause the problem when it was still just a draft?
Apparently a lot of people.
Okay.
I mean, you'd have to go back into logs from 10 years ago to know. I have no idea.
Okay, so any final comments, Murray, before
No, I mean,
we
this
move
is
on?
good discussion. Please, let's keep it going. I want to feel like this is on track for something that when it gets to, when we last call it, people aren't just going to dive all over it and say like, you're not keeping this doesn't fix anything. It should, think about, you are not a member of this working group. You're a part of some other area that has been impacted by this. Like, sell the skeptics. How are you going to do it? That's what I would challenge this working group to start thinking about.
No, I've closed the microphone queue for this discussion. There will be plenty of time to get back on the microphone as we get into the other topics. So, yeah, it's we used to, in spam filtering, we used to think of false positives as you absolutely have to avoid them, and this DMARC has changed that whole view. So we're starting to talk now about what to do about the P equals reject situation and how what we should say in the document about what senders should be thinking about and what recipients should be thinking about along that line. And we have, this came up, I guess I brought this up in Vienna at the Vienna meeting. So that was a bit over a year ago. And we've been talking about it on and off on the list. We now have a couple of concrete proposals. So the options that are currently open, we have, well, the one is no change to the previous text that we had. Todd has rolled some of the new text in just to make it easier to discuss it. But we had previous text and we can go back to that. We can, of course, as I said, decide we're not going to do a standards track version because we can't address this problem adequately. I'm with Neil. I would rather not go in that direction, but that is still a possibility. One choice is to move ARC to standards track if we think we have enough data to show that ARC addresses this problem. I think we don't, but I'm willing to listen to other discussions about that if somebody has some data. And then there's Scott's proposed text and my proposed text. Scott's proposed text tweaks some of the wording that's already that used to already be there. Mine does a bit of rearranging, and that's what's currently in the draft. It moves the normative text into an interoperability considerations section and points to it from both the sender side and the receiver side. I would like to hear discussion about any of these proposals or any other alternatives that people have, and whether some of this is suitable for going into the document. And I'll make one more comment before we start kicking off the discussion, that some have said, we can't really say anything about this because nobody's going to listen to us. And my view, not as chair, but as participant, is that that doesn't really put anything around it. The document that we put out should specify how we think the protocol should be working, with the realization that not everybody is going to obey every word that we put in the document. If this is what we should do, we shouldn't be refusing to say it because we're afraid that somebody won't pay attention. That's my view as a participant. We now have Murray and then Tero, and everybody else, please click your buttons.
This time hatless. We acknowledge someone with Mark, maybe Peter, Barry, correct me if I'm wrong, but we don't like in the 5321 sense ever saying 250 okay on delivery and then not actually delivering it. That breaks things. So the RFCs, I'm pretty sure, say don't do that, even though we are all aware that there are people out there who do silent discards. So to me, this is the same situation where we just say the right thing to do is this. We don't have to say flowery things like we know you won't, because that gets us into bad spots with publication. But this seems like a perfectly analogous case where we would say, don't do this, and then quietly just accept the fact that not everybody listens to everything we say.
Okay, Tero.
Tero Kivinen. Actually, I think one of the problems with P equals react is that it gives the impression that you should react the message. And as we heard before, people are saying that they don't actually react the message because it causes too much trouble. So I was thinking about perhaps it's actually what I understand is the reason why the sender published P equals react was to actually get reports back to actually tell that if he's being fished against or something like that. So if we actually would say, instead of saying we remove P equals reject completely and say P equals report, so that would indicate, yes, you can still process it, you can still drop it, you can still reject it if your other filters say that it's bad, but you should definitely send the report back to say that, do the same kind of processing for the reporting thing that you do with P equals reject, but would give a more indication that you shouldn't be just reacting the message because it happens to be that. You should be using other filters, other things, in addition to that.
So let me get a clarification on that. Are you suggesting renaming P equals reject or adding another option?
Renaming it,
Okay.
meaning that saying that P equals reject is going to be obsolete, that you shouldn't be using anything it anymore, and so on. And actually, this actually comes to back. I think we should be going to version 2. We have been having I think we should actually have a very good, very big, long discussion about that also. There have been discussion about people saying, "Oh, we can't go. We have to go either way." And I think if we go to standard track, I think we should go to version 2. If we recycle with information of, then I don't know. Then we can be backward compatible in that sense.
So the other addition is if we go standards track, do a version bump.
Yeah, version track. And there seems to be one of the problems I have with DMARC and SPF and DCAM is that everybody is talking about spam, and none of this is actually trying to. It's one piece that allows you to use as your filters, as an input to your filters. It doesn't solve any of the spam problem. Most of the spam I get currently, which is actually very low now, it's only 100 mails per day. It used to be 1,000 or 2,000. Actually, it used to be 3,000 emails per day. And now I get, and it was like 5 years, it was 1,000 emails a day. Now I get less than 100, which is not much. And actually only like 5 or 10 comes to my mailbox. The rest are taken by spam. But anyway, so people are claiming that it's all spam. And that's actually, people are, spam is bad, we have to do this. And that's one of the problems is that I think we should be very, very clear that this is not about spam. This helps you to make reputation systems. DCAM helps you to feed your reputation system. It doesn't solve the spam problem.
So a third suggestion is some clear text, non-normative text that just explains better what the intent is. Okay, thanks. Ale. We don't hear you. Ale, we do not hear you.
No, it's on top.
Yes, there you go. We hear you now. And now we don't. We still don't. We heard you momentarily, but now we do not hear you. Why don't you try recycling your audio connection? Okay. I'm gonna move on to wait, Ale. It looks like we can hear you. Try. No. Okay. I'm gonna let Jim come on, and we'll try getting back to you after. Go ahead, Jim.
Thanks, Jim Fenton again. I actually preferred. I think the Barry Liebe's proposed text that's on the table right now is the one with the interoperability considerations. I preferred Barry's earlier text where it was kind of like in line. I'm really concerned that somebody reading the document needs to understand, it needs to state very clearly that there are issues if you're going to publish P equals reject, that there are things that you need to consider about that. I'm concerned that putting it into interoperability considerations is going to be is kind of like pushing it down in the document and not clear enough. So I would kind of propose that earlier version.
So it's that, which is basically Scott's version, is he tweaked my earlier version. So that's basically that. I'll just tell you my thinking about doing that was that this was in talking with Seth, where it's something that would be more palatable to the side who wants to say less, but by focusing it in an interoperability consideration section, we can discuss the issues more rather than just trying to put a sentence or two that says, do this, don't do that. This gives us a place to have more discussion about why.
Well, I recognize that it's an attempt to negotiate a compromise here.
Well, it's more than a compromise. It's because the why is very important in getting people to accept what we have to say, and that was the thinking.
I mean, we have the problem, and agree with other people who have said that the distinction between informational and standards track or anything like that is not very meaningful. I mean, we have DHS that despite the fact that the current spec is informational, is mandating publication of P equals reject for federal agencies. And so, I mean, that's an example of that. So that's part of the reason that I think that the text of the document has to be crystal clear. If you publish P equals reject, the following things will happen.
Okay, thank you. Ale, do we have you back? I see some attempt at video. It appears to be cat eyes there or something. But I still do not hear Alessandro. Yeah, still, I can see your video, but I can see you have glasses on, yeah. But I still hear no audio. This is sad. I'm sorry about that, but Ale, why don't you try getting completely off of Meet Echo and back in and see if that helps. And in the meantime, we'll move on to Mike.
Remind him that he can put something in the chat.
Yeah, you could also type something in the chat.
Michael Hammer representing myself. First off, again, as someone who is part of the original DMARC group, all of the participants, when we went public with it, and even until today, have been very careful to say it solves direct domain abuse, not spam. And I think it's important that we recognize that DMARC is about direct domain abuse, not spam. Having said that, I don't see that there's any problem with having text both near the normative statements and in an interoperability section to more fully speak to the issues. And it may be that there could even be a separate BCP about these issues. So I think it's really more wordsmithing. I think that we've come close to, I don't even want to say a compromise, but agreement on this. But I also want to say, when people say P equals reject, it is a request. I think it should be considered, but at the end of the day, local policy is always going to trump all. And that's just the way it is, whether it's DMARC or anything else. So I'll let somebody else speak.
Thanks, Mike. Before you go away, can you have a look at, well, let's say the introduction section, not immediately, but soon, and see if there's some text that you can propose that would make the goal of DMARC clear, as is what you started saying, that, you know, what it's intended to do and what it's not intended to do, and with respect to spoofing and spam and that sort of thing.
Okay, I'll take a look at that.
Okay, thank you. Wei.
Wei Chuang, Google. So I just wanted to point out a consideration that so if we were to mandate for DMARC, P equal reject should be downgraded to quarantine. It's been pointed out in a recent research paper that there is a risk that it can introduce a forwarding vulnerability, meaning that basically mail that used to be rejected by providers that supported that, that mail then enters the inbox and then gets forwarded out through some policy, whatever it may be, and then it's forwarded out, and that can be exploited by spammers. And my suggestion there is to have something in security considerations that describes that scenario, so that implementers that are going to, do this will be aware of it and look for it.
Okay, and Wei and I talked about this before this session, and I asked him to propose text. So that's, and yeah, Todd wants text as well. Yeah. Todd, let me see if Ale can speak now. Ale, give it a try. And I don't see Ale trying, but there we go. All right. Can we hear you? I do not hear Ale. Okay, Ale, I think the thing to do is type your comment and somebody will channel you in the room, because we don't seem to be hearing your audio. Go ahead, Todd.
Todd Herr. Taro, I had a question for you. Something you said I wasn't clear on. You said something about people publishing peak or reject in order to get reports. I don't understand what you meant by that, because the RUA tag is what gets your reports. So.
Yes, I mean, most of the people rejects. I think my understanding is that why people actually, I don't understand why people actually publish P equals reject, but I was assuming that they actually, one of the solutions, one of the reasons have been given out that it gives you information when somebody is trying to fish or phishing based using your name. So that would be, giving you reports that somebody is doing something nasty using your name. and you could actually do something. I don't know what you could do that. But I have no idea what you would do that information, but that's one of the things. So, but I think the reason I was saying that P equals reject is back because it gives a feeling that you should be reacting the message immediately, and that's what I want. And as they were saying with other carriers, reacting mails based on just by that is usually not the correct solution. And that's why I was saying if it would be, I mean, if we say that, if you want to say that we are not going to be reacting it based on that, then we should probably say that, okay, what is left of that? What would be, you know, one more downgrade, not quarantine, but still, you know, you can still react it based on, you know, other policies, but it should be processed in the same way that you do actually PA equals reject by sending reports if they are requested or so.
So yeah, I just wanted to make sure everybody's clear that the P equal tag is the domain owner's policy for if you see stuff that's unauthenticated from me, please consider treating it like this. RUA gets you posts a mailbox to get aggregate reports, which can show data that, you know, what mail streams are authenticating, which aren't. RUF, which really didn't work, was supposed to get actual samples of messages that failed authentication, which could be instances of or examples of people trying to fish you that you were theoretically going to take to an abuse desk or a takedown vendor, say, hey, get these people off the net, and yeah, they didn't work. So just want to make sure that's understood. The other thing, I posted in the chat a paragraph from the introduction that takes a stab at saying authentication is not about whether this is spam or not spam. So if you have ideas for improving upon that, please post them to the list. So that's all.
Yeah, I think the angle that both Tero and Mike have been on is something more that talks about the intent of DMARC more broadly rather than just a sentence or so. But yep, exactly. Pete
Resnick. Both Wei and Mike Hammer said something that struck me funny that, well, you know, there's been a sense of, well, if we say this, it's not going to matter. If we make it informational, it's not going to matter. People are going to implement it anyway. And that Microsoft or someone was planning on implementing P equals reject in some way that was going to cause more problems or less problems. But we're going through all of this Sturm und Drang, it seems to me, because we're afraid that if we say must not use P equals reject, that people are going to stop using it. I mean, that is exactly what the concern is, that people are going to stop using it. I personally think that's a fine thing.
Well, I'll go with trying to talk about the other side of my view. So I may not quite get it right, but I think actually they're not quite saying that. What they're saying is two things. One, that the people who want to use P equal reject aren't going to pay any attention to us. They're going to do what they want. And the other is that as we try to encourage the adoption of DMARC, people are going to look and say, they tell me not to use P equals reject. What the hell good is it?
So
that's the concern.
But the combination of those two seems oddly contradictory to me.
I understand.
That if this is going to delay adoption of P equals reject, then people will eventually figure out that they shouldn't be rejecting because people don't use that in that way.
The concern is that it'll delay adoption of DMARC altogether.
And that may be the case, but if maybe it's a good thing in the current state of the world that DMARC adoption does get delayed if people continue to implement P equals reject as if someone says that, I'm bouncing the mail no matter what, or I'm going to eat it and silently not tell you that it's bounced, which is even worse. I think we should bite the bullet here, and if the consensus is that interoperability-wise, P equals reject is a bad thing to implement, to advertise if you have users that expect to send to mailing lists or other forwarders, we should say that. And just say it flat out and not try to hide it in an interoperability section where it might not be noticed.
Okay. That is, both proposals that are on the table say that, one in the interoperability section, one outside. Are you arguing for must not rather than should not?
Absolutely.
Okay, that's part of the question. Steve.
Thank you, and I hope my audio is coming through.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Well, following on from Pete, I mean, it's a very important point there that some people say that everybody needs to go to P equals reject, and some people say you must never go to P equals reject. I don't know exactly how we resolve that. I'm not sure you'll ever be able to control how people are going to promote the use of a protocol. There's a fundamental tension, it seems, when it comes to DMARC as an IETF protocol. Generally speaking, we want protocols to be very straightforward and binary, or at least authoritative. You do this or you do that, period. To me, or to my thinking, fundamental to DMARC is a cooperative arrangement between domain owners and mail receivers. If you determine that the message did not pass authentication, I would like you to do this, subject to your local policies, subject to input from your local users, subject to other things that you find out about the message, maybe about the content. You may decide to do something different. Maybe that's always going to be uncomfortable. I'm not sure. The other point that came up, particularly about RUF not working, RUF worked. The regulations around PII and what was considered PII and so forth moved between when RUF was proposed and where we wound up in the world and what people were willing to tolerate or not. See GDPR. I think in the past 10 years, all of us have probably gone through some interesting exercises trying to remediate practices that were fine at the start of that period and were no longer fine a few years in, halfway through, what have you. I think that's about all I've got to add.
Okay, Hector. Thanks, Steve.
Point about the information standard versus a pro standard is that's going to be a lot easier to replace this if we needed to do it in the future as an informational document. As a proposed standard, it's going to be much harder to replace.
So I don't actually think that's the case. It's just as the effort to replace an RFC is pretty much the same regardless of the status of the RFC.
If we call ADSP, and we abandoned it.
Yeah, we made it historic. Yeah.
Right. The other problem is that domains don't know what the recipient path is. The forwarding problem. Right. So I mean, even if you want your P reject, you just don't know how your recipient is going to take that. And finally, towards the P comments, what happens if you have no records at all?
No DMARC record.
What happens? So how is your domain treated at that?
Then DMARC is not in play, and right. We don't say anything about that.
Okay.
So. Neil.
This is probably not that useful. It's a bit late for this, but I would just wanted to say, I think it would be more useful if instead of telling what the recipient server should do, like reject or quarantine, it instead made a claim about what the sending server believes is the case of authentication for their mail. Like, are you claiming all mail from my domain that I send is authenticated? That's really what this is about. What you do with that is then up to you, but I'm telling you that anything I send originally was authenticated when I send it. And that's useful information to the recipient. I think telling the recipient what to do is the wrong way around, but it's probably way too late for this. It's 10 years old. I just wanted to comment on that.
Thanks. And Ale is giving another try. So Ale, go ahead. Let's see if we can hear you now.
I changed the laptop.
Yes. Thank you.
I just wanted to say I like your explanation of the interoperability questions. And if anything at all, it should be, I don't know how to say that, because you only have should or must. Must is too much, because there is people who actually does it, and it does interoperate badly, but it does. So it should. And the one who publish should pay more attention, because they have lots of question more. People posting from different sites and other things like that. when they publish, the receiver should honor. So your explanation say should not reject just because the market says it is should not, but a little stronger than the publisher. The publisher must be more careful than the receiver. That's it.
Okay. Thanks, Ale. I'm glad we finally got your comments. Pete.
Thank you.
This is Pete Resnick. I actually want to disagree with Ale about one thing. It's not should if people do it, and people are going to do it. That's not why we use should. We use should when we're saying there are good reasons to do it the other way. We're not saying that here. There are no good reasons if you expect users to be able to do forwarding services. There are no good reasons to use P equals reject. Interoperability wise, it will fail. And we have repeated information that when we put it the way we put it in the current document, people implement this in ways that fail. Saying otherwise is to not say what we know is going on.
But we see that some people publishes P equal reject and they do interoperate.
But that is true, but we currently have not said must not do that. We haven't explained in this document yet that there is a problem and that you should not that you just simply should not do it because there might be reasons to do it. You must not do it. It will cause interoperability problems. We should say that clearly.
And I'll also point out that it's like people who say, well, I smoked for 50 years and I didn't die from it. It's not 100% thing. It doesn't mean that if you do this, you will always have failures. It just means that the risk of failures is sufficiently high that, that it's problematic. So, Wei.
Two points, I guess. I guess to the immediately earlier point about what the sender's saying, I think there is something to it when a sender says that it's all right because my identity is so important to me that it's okay for a receiver to go reject those messages. There's something in that policy that is useful, at least from a receiver's perspective, to know about. Notwithstanding, this goal right now of trying to downgrade. I think there's, and this is somewhat speaking to Neil's point about that, information about authentication. I think that's also valuable too. It's this combination of knowing that a message is going to be authenticated a certain way, and if it's not, then what to do about it. That's a powerful bit of information that right now the current language in the existing informational DMARC RFC says, and I think if we were to change that so it's discouraged or whatever, we're losing some of that information. I just wanted to point that out and not make these points in some attempt to try to block these changes. But I'm just pointing out that we're losing information.
Okay. Tero?
Yeah, actually, I think it was you Neil who brought this up, that said that the P equals reject tells something about the sender demand. But the funny thing is that we actually express that as an instruction to the receiver. What we should actually completely change this. We should actually, instead of saying P equals reject, we shouldn't be giving instructions to the receiver. We should tell what our policy is. We say that I authenticate all my email. So all my emails are going to be authenticated. If you see anything that is not authenticated, that's not from me. That's your, you can do whatever you like with that, but that's your own policy to decide what to do it. Or I could say that most of my email is authenticated. There might be still some, fringe devices somewhere there that sends mails that are not authenticated, which would be corresponding to quarantine or something like that, meaning that, okay, I have mostly stuff correctly, but there might be still some. So if you actually give the users sender's policy instead of say giving instructions to the responder, I think that would be actually much more useful for giving out the feedback. What you actually what is the input for your policy decisions?
So yes, you're saying that it should be a declaration of authentication practice.
Yes.
Rather
so it would say that
a policy.
Our policy is to sign everything.
Yep.
With for example, DKIM, and my policy is to do this and that, or my policy is to sign most of the stuff, but there might be still some cases where you actually so you shouldn't be, even if you get an email from me that it fails the authentication, you could make a stricter rules for allowing it to pass, but you should still, check it out, not just clearly, react it. Because I think that one of the problems is, DMARC, so many people are, reading the RFC or reading the text and pointing out. I have been, getting several, comments from somebody. Oh yeah, if you don't do SPF, then we just react all of your emails because we are forwarding all the stuff. So and they say, okay, there's this RFC and there's this, SRS, thing that you should be sender rewrite doing, which was some RFC in 2001, and you should be draft 2001. You should be doing that because that's the internet standard. They don't really. So if it would be much more useful to actually point them out. Okay, you should be only telling what your sender policy is, not what the receiver should be doing. Receivers are going to be doing whatever they like anyway, but we would have then perhaps separate issue. For you were saying that you actually miss information if you actually don't publish this P equals reject or people because currently we could have a separate tag saying that, okay, yes, I do consider that my messages are so important that you should really do something different if it actually is not authenticated.
Okay, thanks. Wes?
So I think we're sort of conflating two different things here at once, right? And first, a real quick story. ISI decided a while ago that any outgoing mail from ISI that gets through an alias, and I don't actually know how they're actually determining this, gets dropped coming back to any ISI addresses. It took us a while to realize. So they essentially are implementing, even though it's P equals none, P equals drop in certain cases, right? So it's absolutely true that receivers will do whatever the hell they want. We have a lot of proof from that. To some extent, I think what you guys are all talking about is there are two aspects of, I like the idea of you should really say, this is what I'm doing, right? I'm authenticating all email or not. And the P equals is really a recommendation, not a statement of what you should do. It's really, this is what we think that we can live up to. P equals reject would be just fine with everybody if we didn't have the other problems. So part of the problem is it would be nice to get to the point where a recommended reject policy would actually be okay because we've solved the mailing list issues and other issues, right? And so you're conflating sort of two problems together when you're only talking about one of them at the current point.
Thanks, Wes. And Neil, you've got the last word on this topic.
Oh, good. Two brief things, I guess. Firstly, the original use case of P equals reject for something like PayPal, where they will never send something via mailing list, and if you're forwarding it, you should not break the DKIM signature. That is actually kind of reasonable. It's just that it got so far off that so quickly that I don't know we can get back to that.
Which is exactly what we had with ADSP and why we abandoned it.
Yeah. The second thing is just on the mailing list stuff. I really wish that we'd made sender header another one you could use. And so a mailing list would just do DKIM signature over the new message with its added sender thing. And then it's up to the mail clients to go, well, this fails authentication for from, but it passes authentication for sender. The sender's published some policy maybe, and I'm going to allow that, but I'm going to display a clear thing that this was from Barry Lieber via the IETF mailing list. And then you don't need a whole second standard or anything else, but just a thought.
Okay, so I want to do a little recap and then move on to the next topic. One of the things that I heard from more than one person was go back to having, fine to have an interoperability consideration section, but go back to having the normative text in the places that it originally was. So that's something we need to reconsider. Having it in both places, Taro says. The other thing that I want to probe here is, does anybody think that what's in the interoperability consideration section is wrong? Does anybody have objections to what is in the interoperability considerations? I don't want you to answer that at the mic now because we need to move on to the next topic, but if you do, please post something to the mailing list explaining what you'd like to change there. And now let's move on to topic 3. A little bit ago, I guess during the last MOG meeting, Taro posted something to the DMARC mailing list suggesting that we stop paying attention to SPF in DMARC in the first place because SPF will always pass whenever DKIM passes. So DKIM ought to be enough. And SPF is just a distraction at best and often a vector for problems. We've had quite a bit of discussion on that, most of which involves observations that DKIM isn't always implemented properly, and so DKIM sometimes fails when it shouldn't. And that means that SPF is a backstop for that. And so there's some discussion of that. One of the alternative proposals is that we add a tag to the DMARC record that says the sender would like you to pay attention to SPF, the sender would like you to pay attention to DKIM, or the sender would like you to pay attention to either one. And let's have discussion of that. Tero, you start.
So I'm Tero Kivinen. So I actually give a bit of background why I actually proposed that. So in Finland, we have this organization called IETF. We offer permanent email forwarding. We have our first quarter done, meaning first 25 years. And we have 30,000 members, and all of the emails are forwarded. So if you send the email to kivinen@iki.fi, it gets forwarded to my real email. We never we don't offer any mailboxes.
Right. So SPF will always
SPF
fail.
is always fail if you have a minus all there. And it will never, but yes, there is actually some people asking, okay, can we add IKI's IP addresses to SPF records? And we actually made an underscore spf.iki.fi that you can include if you want. I don't know why they would want to do, but somebody say what to do. But so SPF is always failing. We do also, we have our own outgoing server that actually uses DKIM to sign all the messages. We have an ARC, when every time mail comes in, we do ARC signing. We actually verify SPF and DKIM when they come in. So we actually put in the ARC header. And I sent an email to the DMARC list showing some of the statistics we have. And we have actually, I was actually really, really surprised how many of, emails actually had a valid, DKIM signatures when they come in, and how many actually already had multiple ARC records when they come into to IKI. IKI actually adds one more, but of course, this was actually before we added ourselves. Or actually, it was using adding our. If we add a third one, then we know that there's 2 before. So that's why I think, and as I said, DKIM is usually working fine, and there's always going to be some cases where somebody does something wrong. So I don't think that, okay, yes, somebody implements DKIM wrong somewhere is not the reason to actually, have an SPF. That would be actually a reason to not to use either one of them. Even if DKIM and SPF both fail, you should still allow it to get good, because that will still, be 0.10001% of emails that you want to get. So there's always going to be some percentage of, broken systems, and you never notice those if you don't actually fail something. So that's why I was thinking, yes, having that actually solves much of the issues we have with the DMARC is because we don't modify any of the headers. So DKIM goes through the original sender's DKIM goes through. Sorry, we don't modify them unless we detect that it's a spam and we add a spam header. The user has asked them to add a spam header to the subject, so that then the DKIM will fail. But that's actually probably what user wants to have, because it's detect it as a spam, but so that's the user setting anyway. So
Yeah.
yeah, all right. So that's my the easiest reason why we actually want to get rid of the SPF in DMARC.
Okay, thanks. We have 5 people in the queue. We had 6. Murray dropped himself off. So the queue is closed after Mike. And please speak efficiently because we're down to about 15 minutes left. John.
In a more, John Levine, in a more perfect world, I would agree that getting rid of SPF would be a good idea, but there are way too many senders who got a word from the boss saying you have to implement DMARC, and then they said, what's the cheapest way we can do it? And the answer was with these 2 DNS records, and that's what they do. And many of these like I used to provide mail service for my town government, and they got like DMARC P equals reject messages from the U.S. Census Bureau. So I think getting rid of SPF anytime soon is a non-starter. On the other hand, I would be perfectly happy with auth equals DKIM to tell people like we actually do DKIM, so you should use it. I would not be happy with auth equals both because that's basically attempting to use DMARC to circumvent replay problems and the underlying protocols which need to be fixed down there.
So that was, you answered one question I was going to ask you. The other question is, never mind, I forgot. Hector.
I agree with John there. About SPF. We got to remember SPF comes first. It's processed first. And I'm one of those implementers that will reject on the negative all. And DMARC would never see.
Right. So DMARC is not involved in that.
Right. So, so that tag would help. Okay. Problem there is that how we're going to know the domain name at the SMTP level. And there is, I proposed something on the mailing list using the old sender ID submitter protocol, which passed the author's domain on the mail from line. So that's one way to retrieve it. So that's basically it. That SPF comes first, and you got to remember that. There's still implementers that will reject first the SPF.
Right. But I'll repeat that if you are rejecting SPF, if you are rejecting based on SPF at SMTP time, DMARC is not involved.
Right.
That this spec can say nothing about that because it doesn't get involved.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Let me finish up.
Microphone.
Still learning. But I would want to know what the domain wants to happen, what the sender's saying.
How would you know?
Well, that's the problem. We don't get that information SMTP. Right. There is a protocol out there that exists that will pass it at the mail from level.
Okay. Thanks. Wei.
Wei Chuang. So I agree it's a good idea to support SPF as much as we think it's a good idea to go with DKIM just because of these SPF upgrade attacks. A way to bridge that would be, default, support SPF and DKIM, but then allow the sender to specify using an auth tag which authentication they support. To Neil's point earlier, this might be a way of specifying that, right? I mean, basically, you could have a list of what authentication techniques the sender is going to use if specified through there. I would argue, I agree that doing SPF and DKIM is problematic, or at least a problematic support. I mean, at a technical level, it can be done. It's just like it probably causes more problems. But it would be useful to allow that to specify like an or, meaning if the sender is going to send with SPF and DKIM, that list can support more than one. So then you can specify like SPF and DKIM if they want to assert that they're using both. And perhaps in some circumstances, it's a good idea to know that they have both. There are scenarios where, like with like replay, that it might be useful to know that they also claim that they're doing SPF. I think to Hector's point, and maybe I didn't completely understand what you're saying, but I mean, having some way of knowing that there might be certain circumstances where the mail from might not be directly aligned with the header from and being able to authenticate. Even so, because of whatever enterprise policies, it might be useful to specify what is the domain that is going to be in the mail from. There might be something that would be really useful there to increase the amount of authentication. Maybe it could be another tag. Like basically in the DMARC policy, say DMARC authenticate for SPF domains this, and it may not be necessarily header aligned, but there is, that would be considered a DMARC pass.
So when you say going to be in the mail from, you actually mean going to be in the from header.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Sorry.
Okay.
That's right. And then so that could be a way of increasing the amount of DMARC authentication. Just pointing that out.
Okay. And before we go on to Olivier, John, I remembered what I was going to ask you. So with the SPF and the government stuff and whatever, do you, given that, do you think that the text that I put into the interoperability consideration saying that if you use P equals reject, you must DKIM sign, do you think that mitigates any of that?
Well, it would if people paid attention to it.
Yes.
Yeah. No, I mean, oh, indeed. The reason I noticed this problem is because I forwarded their mail to Gmail, and of course it got lost.
Right.
Yeah. So, I mean, once again, it's like it is a poor implementation, and what they say does not meet what they say that clearly does not reflect what they actually want you to do.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
yeah, I would say like it mitigates it to the extent that we can tell people to do stuff that they're not going to pay attention to.
Okay. Olivier. I did. You can get in it if you want, because you're right.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, my main concern is about the community that might reject the DMARC base, because like I've been working on DMARC since only 1 year for my PhD thesis, and RFC 7489 has been my coffee table for a long time. But I've seen a lot of system administrators that does not understand DMARC at all. As an example, a lot misunderstand like the DMARC or the alignment is will fail if DKIM and SPF will fail. Like a lot of people think it will fail if only one will fail. For example, like a lot of people misunderstand the FO tag. And when I talk to system administrator, they think that the FO tags give you the choice, like what we are talking about today about the authenticated or the OATH tags. And from the result that I have, for example, like 35% of the DMARC owner that have FO tags don't have RUF. It means that they really don't understand. And especially like even in a security conference such as like Usenix, there is a paper that states wrongly how the DMARC check mechanism works. I think like if you change and if the IETF change some specifications, people will get lost because a lot of people, they don't read RFC, the RFCs. Most of them, they go on to blog posts or even like third-party services website that educate them and that told them how it works. I think we should also like go more in the directions like how people feels about DMARC and also how and also like thinking about like those people that have P equal none and non-RUA, non-RUF. For example, like 40% from the measurements that I have, 40% of the DMARC record does not have any P equal reject runtime or RUA, RUF. It means that 40% of DMARC records that, in my opinion, is stateless. So I think that having this tag AUTH might give more opportunities and more chance to the DMARC owner to get implied in the DMARC ecosystem. Thanks.
Okay. Olivier, one thing that I heard there was that maybe the spec could be clearer about a few things. Can you propose some text on the mailing list for things that you think are unclear that could be clarified?
Just to think, I think like the RFC 7489 is crystal clear. When you read it, it's crystal clear. The problem is like we are few people in the world that really read the RFCs. Usually, system administrators just diagonally read RFCs if they read it, or they just diagonally read websites of such as third-party services. So, in my opinion, it's crystal clear when you know it and when you read it well. But it's kind of complicated to go to this.
It's clear, but people don't read what we write. I got you. All right, Mike.
And I agree with what Olivier is saying. And there's also the issue that many administrators are using tools that have them one step removed from the RFC. In other words, they just see I've got a knob or a dial or check boxes to select what I want. So they don't necessarily read the RFC. But as far as giving additional choices, I'm not absolutely opposed to that. But at this point, we don't have a concrete specific proposal in words. And I am concerned because I think we'll run into the same problem that Olivier was speaking to. And as Stephen had pointed out in the chat, when we originally developed DMARC, we had talked about including these options, and the consensus was that it added too much complexity and chance for folks to screw up even more than they do now. And, you know, we see this in other areas. For example, DNS and bind. How many DNS records out there have problems? So it's not something just specific to DMARC. And I think we should bear that in mind as we go forward.
Okay, thanks. All right, Murray, do you have any last words? No. All right, then I'll just do a last call for any final comments on anything we talked about today that someone would like to add. And I see no one jumping up. Good. Then we got through the whole agenda. We did not fully resolve anything, but we have the next step being, I'm going to get a summary of this onto the mailing list. And my goal is going to be to wrap this up and have these two issues closed by the end of August. So we're going to have another few weeks to discuss this last bit, and then I want to get the document wrapped up. So what I'd like to see is some good discussion on the text that's there now. I want to see whether what's in the interoperability considerations is acceptable to most people. I want to revisit the question of whether we put the normative text back into the main line in addition to having it in the interoperability considerations. And we need more discussion on whether we're going to do any change with the SPF thing or not. My sense right now is that there is no consensus to change the status quo on that. Murray.
Those are great short-term items. Just to remind everybody, we need to figure out whether PSD is going in. We need to figure out if ARC is going in. I don't know if we want to do this.
As I see right now, neither of those is in a state where it's going to get rolled into the DMARC BIS spec.
That's fine if that's where we're at with it. As a housekeeping item, we might want to say that what do we normally do for experimental documents? Do we say like this faded away, or like how do we close them? We did. Oh, it is.
So, yeah. Okay. No, go. Yeah.
When we switched from the public suffix list to the tree walk, we added a PSD flag, which basically
Right. Of course we did.
yeah, which
Yes.
yeah. So yeah, we did. It probably would be good to ask Scott to write up a short result report, but I think it'll say like it does what it's supposed to. It's fine.
Right. And that would mean we would obsolete this document would obsolete that. Yes.
Yes. What should we do about ARC? Don't have to decide here.
Yeah. Our ARC needs, we need more data.
Yeah. Okay.
That's, yeah. Okay. Thank you, everybody. It's been a great discussion, and we are adjourned.
Happy IETF. It's over.
What? It already says. Does the metadata? Does the metadata say that?
The DNS walk incorporates BSD policy discovery introduced in 1991. That was an experimental RFC. The results of the experiment were that the RFC was not implemented as it is not reproduced by the algorithms of BSD policy discovery.
Question, does the metadata in the data tracker say that this obsoletes 1991?
I believe so, because there's a little bit right at the top that says obsolete 7489 and 1991.
Okay. And Murray, did Murray run out of the room?
Yes.
God damn it. I needed to talk to him.
That's one of the biggest, I mean, that's one of the biggest. But of course, nowadays, there's so many people actually implementing things only by only by brands, and that's how for us. I mean, I have very so they know I just because they are good they use it before, so each yes, make him do it.
I'm busy with DMARC. Well, no, what did you want me to do?
I really don't count, but I have to be very careful with it. Some of the world, so be very careful when I take it. Other than